Okay. Yes, I think we can start our webinar. So, good afternoon and welcome to our today's webinar. This webinar is dedicated to European Innovation Council Pathfinder and Transition calls. Before we will start our webinar, and waiting for more people to log in, because we had 400 registrations. I will provide you with some general information about project and this event. So my name is Alexander Bakowski. I'm a team leader of the Turkey Horizon 2020 project. I will moderate today's webinar. Turkey Horizon 2020 project is a project jointly funded by European Commission and Turkish government. Beneficiary of this project is TÜBİTAK, and contracting authority is Ministry of Industry and Technology of the Republic of Turkey. The main objective of our project is to support participation of Turkish stakeholders in EU framework programs for research and innovation. So now we are working on Horizon Europe, which is current framework program. For the last 3 years, since we have started our project, we have organized more than 100 different trainings and events with more than 10,000 attendees. So you see, we organized on average more than one training per week. So you can visit our website, because there are some more trainings which are scheduled for the coming weeks. So you might be in some of them, you might be interested in. So go to our website and to see details. This training is the second training organized in the frame of our project, dedicated to Pathfinder and Transition calls. First, we have organized in April 2021, and as you know, the Pathfinder is about exploration for radical and new technologies. So Pathfinder is for projects to provide proof of principle and to validate scientific basis for such technologies, while Transition is to validate technology and develop market readiness. So there are two complementary phases of technology development. So as I mentioned, our first training was to support participation in the first cut-off date for Pathfinder. And for Pathfinder Open, there were 860 proposals, more than 860 proposals evaluated, and 56 proposals were selected out of this. So you can see that there is very strong competition in these calls, but good thing is, good news is that one out of these 56 proposals selected, there is one coordinated by Turkish organization. So it means that there is a strong potential in Turkey to win projects in Pathfinder calls, and of course in transition calls. We will have today, the second training is organized before March cutoff date for Pathfinder Open. More details, of course, about calls will be provided by our expert, Erich Prem, for EUTEMA. This is all I wanted to say at the beginning. So now I would like to pass the floor to Merve Polat, European Innovation Council National Contact Point at TÜBİTAK for introductory and introduction to the webinar. So Merve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexander, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this unique event. Today, we will try to cover two main funding mechanisms under European Innovation Council, EIC, which are Pathfinder and Transition. I believe this event will be very useful for the participants since we will be listening to details of these two programs from an expert in the field, Dr. Erich Prem.
Ja, Karl, ganz schnell.
Okay, Dr. Erich Prem, thank you so much for your valuable contribution to this event. I will now share a small introductory presentation about us as TÜBİTAK National Coordination Office. Let me share my screen. I think it's okay. I think you can see.
You can go to full screen.
Is it full screen now?
Yeah, now it's full screen.
Sorry for the inconvenience. I was intending to use PowerPoint slides, but I think there's a problem with communication between Zoom and PowerPoint, so I will continue with PDF. So my name is Merve Polat, and I'm the national contact point for EIC on Horizon Europe Programme, together with my colleagues Tarık Şahin and Merve Diyarkaya. Before starting, I would like to remind you that we will be here with you throughout the event to respond to your questions. You can send them through Q&A section, so we will be pleased to help your questions to be answered. I would like to begin this presentation by giving some brief information about the framework programs. It is the R&D funding program of European Union and started in 1984. If you look at the timeline, we are now in the 9th framework program, which is Horizon Europe, and started in the beginning of last year. Turkey involved in the framework programs in 2004 during the 6th framework program, and since that day, framework programs has been coordinated by TÜBİTAK through a dedicated national coordination office. In this table, you can see the general structure of Horizon Europe, which consists of 4 main components: excellent science, global challenges and European industrial competitiveness, innovative Europe, widening participation, and strengthening the European research area. EIC, which is the main topic of our event today, is located under Innovative Europe pillar. We can define this pillar as the innovation pillar of whole Horizon Europe program. And moreover, we can also say that all of these programs under this pillar were created to serve the innovation world as a whole. When compared to the previous program, Horizon 2020, we can see major changes in the pillars of the framework program. EIC was a pilot program before Horizon Europe, but now we can say that it reached to its full form in 2021 with Horizon Europe. Before that, we were under the industrial leadership pillar, named as innovation in SMEs and access to risk finance. Moreover, we also had the former FED, Future and Emerging Technologies program. And now in Horizon Europe, all of these 3 programs came together to form the EIC component of the Innovative Europe pillar. Here you can see how EIC under Horizon Europe program is structured. There are 3 main funding mechanisms, Pathfinder, Transition, and Accelerator. And for all of these 3 programs, there are both open funding and strategic challenges options. Since this is an introduction about who we are and what we do as National Coordination Office, as TÜBİTAK, I do not want to go into the details of these programs, but I strongly recommend you to take a look at our previous events about these programs on Turkey in Horizon 2020 website. And in addition to these three programs, there are also EIC prizes and EIC Community and Business Acceleration Services as other components of the EIC under Horizon Europe program. Sorry. I would also like to share some information about who we are. We are the members of National Coordination Office of Horizon Europe at TÜBİTAK. As you can see here, we have a dedicated and new website for this purpose, which is ufuk.org.tr. You can see EIC Avrupa Yenilik Konseyi section on the main page. And from this page, you can find all the details about us and our programs. So we strongly recommend you to register our website and choose the newsletter options that fit you. In this way, you will keep receiving all the news and updates from our website. If you go into EIC section, you will see more detailed information about our team, as I said, about our programs. You can see our contact details on the right side. So again, we would like you to register our website and contact us anytime you want about your questions. You can also find us and our contact details together with the details of other national contact points from Who is Who section, which is located on the top of the main page. Finally, I would like to also give some brief information about the programs that we provide as National Coordination Office at TÜBİTAK. In order to encourage the participation of Turkish partners in framework programs, we provide some supports and awards as a National Coordination Office. These support and award programs are dedicated to support various partners such as SMEs, academicians, and institutions. Increasing the quality of the proposals submitted to the framework programs is another purpose of our National Coordination Office. In addition to these, we also want to increase the leadership and the number of Turkish coordinators in the framework programs in this way. Finally, as I mentioned, we also have award programs to encourage successful people to continue their works. Here you can see our social media account details. Ufuk Avrupa TR is our official Twitter account, and we also have a dedicated LinkedIn account for Horizon Europe. All of the news and updates are also being shared to our social media accounts. So again, we strongly recommend you to follow us. So thank you Thank you for listening to my short presentation. I hope that I have encouraged you to take a look at what TÜBİTAK has to offer. I shall be here with the project team to respond to your questions. So thank you again, and I hope it will be a very fruitful event for everyone.
Thank you very much, Merve. There are two questions, but I think I can answer them because the first question is about cut-off dates. Maybe preliminary comment. We don't have still official work program for European Innovation Council. But our informations are based on draft work program. So of course, cut-off dates are presented in draft work program, and hopefully they will not change. But in any case, we have to look at the final documents when they will be published. So for Pathfinder Open, as I have already mentioned, deadline is 2nd of March. For Pathfinder Challenge, 26th of October 2022. For transition calls, first cutoff date is 6th of April, and also for transition challenge and for accelerator. The first cutoff date is 6th of April. I think that Eric will mention all of these dates again in his presentations. There was one more question about presentations. Presentations will be available for all participants. We are sharing the presentations through our website.
Alexander, can I interrupt you for
yes,
something
of course.
important? Sorry for that.
Of course, of course.
But I think yesterday we had a meeting with a PC meeting. So I think there's these dates changed, but since it is not official yet, we don't have the official final draft yet. Maybe Dr. Erich Prem also knows about it, but probably the deadline for Pathfinder Open will be later, in the beginning of May. And for challenges, it will be again in mid-October. For the transition, the first cutoff will probably be in early May. So probably it will be released soon, the final draft, the final version of the work program. But I think the dates will be postponed especially for Pathfinder to May.
Thank you, Merve, for this clarification. So as I mentioned, look at the final documents, not the draft version, because there might be changes, and this is very important changes to the cut-off dates. Now, I think it's time to move to Dr. Erich Prem. Erich, it's time for your first presentation, I think, about EIC Pathfinder, understanding of EIC Pathfinder.
Right. Do you hear me well?
Yes, perfectly.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind invitation. I've worked with TÜBİTAK a bit in the past. I remember very nice meetings in Istanbul, but for the time now, these are unfortunately not possible, but maybe in the future again. Right. So, very important information to start with. My information in this presentation is based on the draft work program, and it cannot be otherwise. I do not have the pleasure of being a member of the program committee, so yesterday's updates are not included. I will repeat this because I think it's important not to get the timing wrong. However, since the dates have been shifted towards the back, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. But it would have been crazy if the first deadline actually would have been in a month from now, basically, without having the final program. So I think it's good that these dates are shifted. All right, I'll see if I can share my screen. Let me see. And now usually what happens when I do this, which screen do you see?
Two screens now. You have to.
Do you see the presentation with the two slides, or the what?
Yes, with two slides. With two slides.
Okay, that's it precisely like it should.
You have to change the.
Yes. Right. Where was that? Goodness.
At the top, I think.
Sorry, do you know how I change the screens? That's.
Eric, this is TÜBİTAK. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Please click.
That's the one, right?
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
This is always the same problem. Thank you. Good. So, okay. Now, since you have already had a bit of presentation about well, maybe I should say a few words about what my background and knowledge of this is. So those of you who know the program a bit more in detail will know that it has emerged from previous programs, or has evolved from the Future and Emerging Technologies program, which was probably one of the most successful programs of the European Commission. Successful in terms of technology development and in many other respects. I think I've been a part of the program committee, of the IST program committee, when someone, I think it was the German delegate, said, FET is really the kind of research that we should be funding generally in the framework program. So I think it has developed a certain quality. Now, that also means that when this program was further developed now and moved towards the EIC Pathfinder program, there has been a lot of discussion. Some people were not happy, as always, when things are changing. And I think it is still important today that I will be pointing out some of the differences, maybe also some of the similarities that I believe are still valid compared to those older programs, because many of you perhaps have been active in FET and are interested what these differences are. The EIC has always made it very clear that they want to build on those successes. So I think this is good news. But of course, things are changing, and it's a new agency who is in charge now. There are new people, and it has a different spirit. And without any doubt, the spirit is much more about innovation. So I've been, as I said, much more involved with FET because it was a very long program, but I'll do my best to explain the Pathfinder details in this seminar. I will occasionally stop and see if there are any questions that we can take in, because it's actually a very long presentation. And if I keep talking for 2 hours, I'm not sure I have the stamina to do that. But let's just start with this essential difference, which is on one hand, EIC Pathfinder, which is one part of the program, and on the other, where we have EIC Transition. So Pathfinder is much more this older FET-like spirit, which is future and emerging technologies. It's about new ideas, but always with a technology and market perspective, let's say. Maybe that's the right word. It's not so much a focus already, but it is a perspective. It's not just technology development with a purely scientific approach where you develop or investigate a research field in order to discover what it's about. It already has an application perspective in mind. This is the general spirit. And EIC Transition is much closer to the market. This is really about where we prepare our technology inventions for the market and develop them, mature them, so as to say, if you want, in a technology readiness level, we bring it up to higher market readiness. We can discuss if this view is generally correct, because what's behind it is very much a linear model of innovation. It's very much a view that starts with science and research, and at the end has the application, which is not the most modern scheme, so to say, because nowadays, of course, we know there is a lot of interaction between the market, between the technology, between science, as it should be. But as you will see in the next slides, EIC has been thinking about this, and there are elements of these interactions which I think are also important to keep in mind to write good proposals in the end and to get funded. So the motivation, the general motivation behind this whole thing is indeed improving the innovation performance in Europe, delivering innovation funding, and develop an innovation ecosystem. So it's about strong research that has always existed in Europe, but it's not always translated into innovation. There is a claim that Europe is very good in writing papers, and indeed we are. We are a very productive region in the world in terms of doing research, but it's not always translated into successful or disruptive innovations that create new markets. Now, a colleague of mine has developed a very interesting theory saying that this is not so much only due to the lack of funding, it's also perhaps because in Europe sometimes we do not focus on the right topics so much. But this is definitely the goal of the initiative, to improve the access to the market. And really what EIC are trying is to cover the whole area, from the creation of the idea to financing gaps in the transition phase. That's always very difficult, not just in Europe, but especially here, from bringing these inventions or discoveries to the lab, from the lab to the enterprise. So this scaling up of a research result to higher levels that are then, let's say, the foundation, or could be the foundation of a startup or a spin-off, that's really what's behind this whole idea. So this is the idea of the new European Innovation Council, which is a massive program. It really tries to combine research on these emerging technologies with accelerator funding for SMEs and scale-ups. It also tries to bring in other players, and so this is actively managed by the EIC. They are establishing, for example, a discussion with the European Institute of Technology and its knowledge hubs to see where could they cooperate. They do have, of course, close discussions with investors and funders. And the idea is to do all of that with the help of very active program managers, probably more than we have seen in the past when you had a project in the European Commission. We'll see if they can actually do this. This is a challenge, and it will also need a certain, let's say, a certain liberty on the side of the program. So EIC Pathfinder, as I said, is this first program that is a bit more FET-like. It funds research to develop the scientific basis to underpin breakthrough technologies. Right? That's already a rather complex thing to think about. So it's about research, yes. It develops a scientific basis, but it already aims at a breakthrough technology, right? So the right thing, I believe, to approach this is to ask yourself the question, what if we could do X? And with X being something technological that would then lead to solving a problem that many people have, for which they probably would be willing to pay a lot of money. That's the right question to ask. But it may still be a scientific idea. It may be still in a field where we don't know the answers yet. So EIC Pathfinder is inspired by this perspective of a market, but it is still research. And it has two different branches. It has a branch where you can come to the program with any idea you have. It's bottom up, there are no predefined topics. And it has another part where the program defines challenges that researchers can respond to. So these are top down. The topics are identified in a complex process where many people are involved, where also researchers and scientists talk about their opinions. There is, of course, a lot of topics that are up in the air, as you can imagine, when you're doing research. And also they sometimes come from previous Pathfinder open projects that develop nice ideas. And then people say, okay, look, this is really an interesting area where we should have more projects. And this is, for example, how a Pathfinder challenge topic can come into existence. But this is tackling specific technology breakthroughs in specific areas. The European Innovation Council is relatively new, but it has been running for, depending on how you count it, let's say basically last year. There have already been successful proposals. You see some figures here in the cutoff date, 25th of May last year. 868 proposals were evaluated, of which 56 projects were chosen, which in total include 322 participants. Now, let's have a quick look at the participants, because that gives us an idea of what this is about. Roughly half of the participants are higher education. So basically, in most cases, this is universities. Maybe approximately then you have a quarter being private organizations, so such as SMEs, but these are not necessarily all, let's say, very close to market SMEs. This could also be some spin-offs. They could be some startups, some younger companies. And then you have approximately also a quarter of the participants being research organizations that are non-university type, private research organizations, state-run research organizations, whatever. The first thing that may be striking to you when you look at these figures is that the success rate is not overwhelming, let's say. We're talking about 868 proposals being submitted and 56 projects being chosen, which is less than 10%. So And that already shows you, I mean, it's still better than in some of the other programs of the European Commission. I think in the Marie Curie programs, typically you have only a few % success rate. But it's not like every second project is submitted. And that means you need to come with a very good idea. You need to come with a good proposal. You need to have a good team. And all of these are really necessary ingredients. Otherwise, it's just not worth the effort. It's a very difficult, it's a very challenging program. So these projects here promise to develop novel technologies that have already applications in mind, but they range over a wide range of topics, from health to environment to energy, computing, and AI. All right. Now I'll stop here just because we have just started and see if there are any burning questions at this point in time. I don't know who is Merve. Are you still there, or who is Alexander? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking at the questions and I don't see any new ones. No new questions from.
No questions?
No.
I hope that's a good sign.
No, at that point.
Okay, all right.
Everything clear.
I hope that's good. Good. Thank you, Alexander. Pathfinder Open. So who is it for? Or you can also frame this question as, what are the gatekeepers? So the first really important question is, do you have a vision? Do you have a vision for a future technology that could make a real difference to our lives? There used to be an Austrian chancellor who said that if you have visions, you need a doctor. And he has always been quoted on this, and he doesn't like it because he thought it was misquoted. But here really it is about having a vision. It is about having an idea of where this technology could go in order to improve our lives. I'm emphasizing this because, and you may guess that I have been evaluating proposals before. When you come as an evaluator, what you are really looking for is something that gets your attention, where there is something that when you read the text, you think, yeah, this is great, this should be done. And therefore, I believe you need to have such a vision. Now, there is a difference between having this vision and what you write in the proposal, or what you can do in a project. What you can actually do may be a smaller part, but you still need to have a vision of where you're going, why. And without this vision, it's very difficult to come up with something that fascinates you as a reader of the text. And therefore, I believe this is really important. That does not mean that this vision is, outrageous, crazy, exaggeration. That's not the idea. It should still be something that's grounded in reality, that is credible, that is something where we all can say, yes, we need that, and we need it, let's say, within the next 5 or 7 years or so. But still, this vision is key. And then, of course, the second question is, typically, in order to realize this vision, what is the science that needs to be done? What's the research that needs to be done? Which fields need to be further developed? What is it that we cannot yet do or don't know? These are two different questions. One is the science question, the other one is the technology question, both of which are possible questions to ask in the program. And typically they come in combinations. Very often there is something we can already do, there's something we do already know, but the two fields really fall apart. Not just because we know something doesn't mean we can do it. And in the program you have a chance, you have an opportunity to do research to develop the knowledge, but also to develop the technologies further. Again, why am I emphasizing this? Because sometimes when you read the proposals, it's not very clear also what the difference between the two is, which is not good in a project of Pathfinder. You need to be very clear, where would you like to develop knowledge and where do you want to use this knowledge in order to develop technologies further. Usually what you have in these projects is you need an interdisciplinary team. It's very often these projects are not such that they are just within one very limited disciplines. They are not just about chemistry. They are not just about, I don't know, cryptography. So very often they need to combine various players. Why? Because they already think about the application. They already think about how this could be used. And this nearly automatically makes it necessary to bring in other disciplines, at least to some extent. And then very often it is about, it's about the validation of a scientific basis for a future technology. So very often it's also, the question is slightly more boring in that we're asking, okay, we know this, but can it now be done so that we turn this into something practical? So you see, for those of you who know FET, it's very similar, but it does have some different taste to it, let's say. Who can apply? You should apply if you want to realize this vision, or at least if you want to develop the technology further. I'll come back to this question of, do you need to be the person who is then marketing it? Probably not. But you need to have let's say, an ambition to create and realize this vision. That should have in mind typically new markets. And that's more or less a given when you're developing a completely new technology. I mean, of course, some market may already exist. That's very good typically. It's much more difficult if you have to develop a market from scratch. But in many cases, there will be a market that you will be changing with your technology. And very often, if you're really looking into, let's say, a growth market, then this should be something that has a global perspective, not just a regional or a local one. As I already said, this program is for early stage development. Usually we say technology readiness level 1 to 4, which is very basic, but already with an understanding of the technology that could come from it. I think this was already mentioned. There is a lot of information that you'll find in the internet. You get the presentation and then you can just download the document. It is key you have a look at the final version of the program document, because some of the figures in this presentation will be wrong because they are based on the draft, as I already said. But there's a lot of documents. I want to maybe commend the EIC for writing a program document that is much easier to understand than some of the older documents. I think they have done a good job in making it easy to read. So don't be shy, really have a look at it. It's fairly straightforward. Of course, when it comes to some gory details, you may have to consult with TÜBİTAK or some other agency that can help you. But it's much better than in the past, I should say. So this is a slide that is now outdated because the original deadline for submitting proposal was 2nd of March. That is not likely to hold because that would be in a month and the program has not yet been published. So if it's May, that's fine. That gives you more time. Anyway, if you would have started now, that's maybe something I should say now. If you would have started now to prepare a very good Pathfinder proposal, it is probably too late. However, you can still start now if the deadline is in May. So that's good news. You will need more than 1 month. Why do you need more than 1 month? Not so much because it's a lot of text to write. This is not the case, depending on which sub-program you will be addressing. It's basically around 20 pages of pure text. But the essential part is to develop a very good text. There is this joke that writing something shorter that's good is much more difficult than writing something long that's average. But it's also because you need a very good consortium, and that usually takes time. Don't make the mistake of just going in with the partners that you already know. It is always a good idea to have a look around and see if there is one excellent partner that you can take on board, and that just takes time. So if the deadline would be in March, that's just very difficult. For the open part, here are some again, let's say the gatekeepers. So it needs to be collaborative interdisciplinary research. Collaborative means, as I said, you have a team with each partner in the team doing what they can best do. And these may be very different functions. This may relate to research subfields, but it can also relate to marketing aspects, to understanding the technology, to understanding the trends, to being maybe involved with users, etc., etc. And that also means it is typically interdisciplinary. I'm emphasizing this because there is a part in the proposal where you have to describe the interdisciplinarity. And as I said, there is always an interdisciplinary aspect, except for very, very few exceptions, but typically there is. I said enough about the vision. I don't need to repeat this. And I think it needs also to have a concrete and ambitious technology breakthrough. When I'm saying concrete, it's very difficult to generalize what this means in a given proposal. But I think what is the best thing is you need to understand how this technology could look like, what it could look like if it worked. And then you don't be shy to describe this vision, even if you think you may not reach 100% of it. I think that's a mistake that is typical also with engineers very often, that they are shy to extrapolate because then they fear they will be measured on some of these promises. I don't think that's a big mistake. You just need to be clear that this is a vision and then describe it very well. Don't be afraid of describing something that is risky. This program is about risky technologies in the sense that we don't know if we will succeed. Not in the sense that the application of the technology should be risky. That is a different kind of risk that you probably want to avoid. But if a project doesn't have a high level of risk, it's probably not the right project for Pathfinder. And the risk is one of realization, one of doability. Can we really do this? Can we realize this? And it's something to keep in mind and to address actively. And it also means that you should think about what happens if something goes wrong. What if we cannot achieve this? Do we have a plan B? And then describe what you're going to do. So it's welcome to have risks. The expected outcome of a Pathfinder project is typically a proof of principle. It's something that shows that the main idea is feasible and something that helps you validate the scientific and technological basis. That's also important. It's not about the validation of a product so much. It's about validating the technology so that in maybe another project you can then make a significant step towards a product. And the uptake of this development, therefore, is in the future. So in your project, then, if you do not develop the product right away, you should also include some protection of the intellectual property. I think that's just straightforward. You need to think about, okay, if we are doing this now, if we are developing this wonderful technology, can we protect it so that there is a guarantee we will still get a share of the economic turnovers once this thing is realized. I think this is understandably one of the main ideas behind the program. So there's another aspect that is, I think, that is quite a little bit new. There have been some activities, but not many, that in the projects, the teams are encouraged to involve and empower key actors that can become future leaders in their fields, meaning that it is very welcome to not just have, let's say, the big shots of your university, the big company bosses, but also to describe how maybe younger scientists, younger entrepreneurs could benefit from this project, how they could develop their career with this project. That's always welcome, especially, I should say, if it's targeting women, and I will come back to this aspect. So overall, the program has an objective, and this program objective is to strengthen Europe's capacity for exploiting the scientific discoveries in Europe. So it is science, but it is about exploitation. Now, typically in a Pathfinder project, We are talking, as I said, about the lower TRL levels. We are talking about the TRL levels 1 to 4, which is really the basic, more basic research, and some of the research at least in the previous FET projects, and I think probably still in some of the Pathfinder projects, are pretty basic research. So they are pretty close to what you would usually do in a lab. But they need to have a vision, as I said, a trajectory towards technology. So it's still admissible even to validate a technology as long as it's in the lab. That would be kind of the borderline for a Pathfinder open project. And then in the higher levels, typically Pathfinder would say, well, that's maybe close to the market. In practice, I think you may, the variety may perhaps be a little bit bigger, but I think it's difficult to predict, but it is a good idea to stick to these TRL levels as they are stated here. Typically for the Pathfinder Open, as I said, this is a consortium, so you need to have at least 3 independent legal entities where each is established in a different member state or associated country. And then who is participating can be a wide variety, but we have seen in practice, it's typically universities, research organizations, and then industry. And you should have a good mix of partners, I guess. I said that. What will you get? Well, what you get is a grant. It's a research and innovation grant that covers eligible costs. I'm not going into the details of what those are, assuming that you have some experience with funding. There is a list and there are details, and the details are many, but by and large, you get personal costs and also costs for your consumables, for your travel, and certain percentages can be also charged if you are using infrastructure, etc. But there are details, and it's worth looking into them. I'm sure you could simply ask a colleague if you don't know what these are. This call has been advertised or has been prepared with a budget such that projects with up to 3 million euros are considered appropriate. For the open part, I should say, it's different for the challenges. That doesn't mean you can not come with larger amounts. You can. Occasionally you get these larger projects in a call. How would I rate the likelihood of getting through with this? I think if it's a very good project, it can be more costly, but it is always a safer bet to stay within this limit, because it's a very human thing of evaluators to become very picky if the amount of money is very high. So it's not so much the funding body that is the problem, it's the evaluation process and the evaluators who will become very critical. Yeah, and there's quite a bit of money in that call. I think the figure in the draft work program was 183 million euros. In addition, there is an opportunity for projects to get some additional money. I'm only briefly mentioning this. If you are selected, you may get additional grants with fixed amounts of up to 50,000 euros for some complementary activities and for portfolio activities. What are portfolio activities? Portfolio activities are basically when the program manager puts projects together in a portfolio, he or she may decide that there should be some additional activities, and for this there are these potential grants. I'm not going to say much more about it because it's much more difficult to get the project in the first place, and then it's just nice to get some additional funding should it be funded. But yeah. How do you apply? The only way to apply is to submit your application through the European Funding and Tenders portal. You need to have the right template for the right project type. What is nice is that it's relatively short proposals for the part where you describe the actual research. There is, of course, forms and other things that you also have to fill in, but there is a maximum of 17 pages for the sections 1 to 3 in part B. And there is also the now, I think, relatively well established deadline, timeline from deadline to contract, which shouldn't be more than 8 months after the call deadline. This is actually, I've seen in the past that for some, especially nowadays, this is maybe even too short for some people. So actually be warned that in the worst of all cases, you get the project funded and then you have to do it, and you may need the staff and you may need to have the resources put in place to start relatively quickly. Okay, so I think I said this. This is the relevant part. Anna, I didn't explain this. So there is for those of you who have not yet submitted a project to the Pathfinder program, there is a new element in the evaluation of these projects. There is a rebuttal phase. So all of you may know that typically whenever you submit something, it's peer evaluation. So there is an individual evaluation. It's also true for this part of the program. There's an individual remote phase of evaluation where the proposals are assessed by expert evaluators. Typically, these experts are people who have an understanding of the area of the proposal. However, not all three may be experts in the precise scientific area where that proposal lies. And so this is also important. It's because it means you need to write the proposal slightly differently. It is not the same as writing a basic research grant where you would expect that this is evaluated by, I don't know, 3 peers that are really experts in the very same area. Typically, the experts are a bit broader. The agency will try to have a mix of competences in the evaluation team, some of which may be closer to a market, some of whom may have experience with technology development. Although they will all have a rough understanding of your proposal, they may also have to bring together, because some of the proposals are interdisciplinary, different views. So this is something to keep in mind. You're not just writing for your typical, let's say, core basic research evaluators, which means you need to explain a bit more. You need to put this into perspectives and maybe in several disciplines. That's one of the challenges. And then they give their assessment. They can ask questions, which means you can this is this rebuttal phase. You can reply to them on 2 pages. You cannot change your proposal. You can only send replies. And then there is an evaluation committee that takes into account what you have said to the comments of the original evaluators, and then they decide. Okay. So, well, here are the details of this rebuttal phase. I don't think I need to explain this now. It's maybe more important to know that it exists, and that usually a different group of people, namely the committee, will decide on your project after taking into consideration the original marks from the original readers, and then what you have sent as replies. More important is because that is generally true, that there are 3 criteria against which your proposal will be evaluated: its excellence, its impact, its quality and efficiency of the implementation. I think we have seen this triad of criteria for a very long time now. I think it more or less has been around for a decade. There has been some variation in the past, whether these have been 3 or 4 or 5 criteria. But in the end, this is relatively clear. Excellence is about the quality of what you're proposing to do, in the sense, is this basic research? Is this research that fits with the call? Is this technology development at a level that is really leading edge? That's the question. Is the quality of the research good? Impact is a different dimension. It's about what could this change in the world if you succeeded in doing this. And quality and efficiency of the implementation are like more the organizational settings. Are you doing this in the right way? Is what you are proposing sound? Do you have enough resources for doing that? Is this realistic, or is this just not organized in a good way? All right. There is, in the old days and in some other schemes, the evaluators had to agree on a score. This is not the case here. There is an algorithm, basically the weighted sum, by which this is done. Let's have a quick look at the evaluation criteria in detail, because I think this is important. Alexander, you are a little bit, I hope, observing time as well, so that I'm not, completely running out of time.
Yes, I'm following the presentation, so it's.
You just wave at me or interrupt me when you think I should stop. Okay. Many thanks. Good. Evaluation criteria. So again, long-term vision is an essential part of excellence. How convincing is the vision? Is this, and you would be surprised how many proposals do not very well explain this vision. And the vision boils down to the question, is this important? Is this an important question to ask? Now, I don't know exactly where this comes from, probably because many researchers think they are important, and they, of course, they understand their field very well. They have an understanding of why this is important, but not necessarily colleagues, let alone colleagues from different fields of research. So it may be really key to explain with a few sentences why you think this research is important. And when I say with a few key sentences, this does not mean to come up with some crazy figures that you will be targeting all of China with your development and you will sell 1 billion of devices. That is not typically what a reader, an evaluator wants to read. It is more about this question: why do you think this can transform whatever you are targeting based on a technology with an economic effect? Whereas the second question will be, so where is the credible breakthrough that you will bring about? And here it can be many things. It can be a more scientific breakthrough, that you have a feeling that there is one piece of knowledge lacking where people just haven't looked close enough in the past. It can also be that there is a link missing from the science to the technology. So it's difficult to say what this breakthrough is, but you should have a very clear understanding of what you would like to bring about. You need to be very concrete with respect to your objectives, and this is always very difficult in proposals, because they need to be exact, but they also need to be ambitious. And of course, they lie in the future, so it's very difficult to predict precisely what you're going to achieve. Here, my recommendation would be, don't be too afraid. I mean, not so much about, afraid of, this shouldn't be crazy figures. You should be able to give some figures, to give an understanding how much are you going to improve this, or how much will you go on your way, so that an evaluator understands, is this a small step? Will this be a massive step? What is your idea of how far you can go? If in the end you don't make it, so be it. I think that's not the point. But of course, if you're promising too much, that's also makes it very difficult and not credible. So this is difficult. You need to really think down and motivate why these objectives are within your reach and that they are ambitious. But be precise as you can. Don't be afraid of also giving numbers wherever you can. It's just one of the most discussed aspects between evaluators. Nowadays, it's probably not discussed because it's single evaluations, but still an evaluator wants to know, what is the precise objective? And this can be several objectives. There can be a science objective, there can be a technology objective, there can be a market objective. All of this could be easily find itself within one Pathfinder proposal. And then interdisciplinarity is also judged under this criterion. I think here you don't need to write long pages, but a mentioning of how this interdisciplinarity will help is always a good idea. Don't forget to describe how you're actually going to do it, because interdisciplinarity can sometimes be very difficult. The different disciplines have different histories, different objectives, different traditions. It's not so easy, so it's probably worth talk to your colleague and be relatively concrete in how you're going to do this. Will this be a workshop? Will you sit together? Will you deliver your results to the other partner? What is it? There is a threshold in this criterion, which means if you don't make at least 4 points, you will not go, you will not be funded. And the weight when forming the overall weighted sum is 60%. Then there is the second criterion, that's the impact criterion, which is this innovation potential. So this is about the vision. This is about the question, considering the measures that you have in the proposal, how easy will it be to come up with some innovation? And that means, do you have measures in the proposal that facilitate future translation of research? So for example, are you consulting with industry? Are you demonstrating maybe something that you show to industry? Are you discussing what they need with some lead users, what they need rather? Are you discussing some of the next steps with experts in the field so that you broaden the knowledge about your project? All of this is important, including communication and dissemination. These are 2 different aspects. They are not always very clearly separated in proposals. Dissemination is more traditional disseminating of knowledge. This is your publications where you put them nowadays online. Where you communicate, where you disseminate your results. And nowadays, this should also very often include maybe some data, maybe some pieces of programs, so that people can experiment it with it. Maybe people get to know with it. Depends very much on what you're doing. And communication includes also how are you communicating within the project, how are you communicating with some of the key stakeholders. And there, I think you need to develop a good plan. Nowadays, much of it will be electronic, much of it will be supported with social media. A lot of it should be with open science. There is actually a requirement in these projects to be open to others. That doesn't mean you forego protection of intellectual property. That is, of course, absolutely allowed and encouraged. But still, as far as science is concerned, you should be as open as possible. So this has a relatively low threshold with 3 out of 5 and a weight of 20%. And then there is the third evaluation criterion, which is quality and efficiency of the implementation. Basically 3 sub-bullet points here, which are quality of the consortium. So are these the right partners? Do they bring in the necessary competence? Maybe one piece of information: if you have never been an evaluator, I would like to stress that usually you will never read in a, or very rarely you will read in an assessment that these are the wrong partners, or that the partners are not good enough. And this is just because evaluators are very polite people. So usually what you will get back, if there is a problem, then some evaluators will say something like, it is not fully clear who would deliver X, or it is not clear from the proposal that partner X has experience in Y. But that will tell you then that something was wrong with the consortium. As I said before, it is worth the effort bringing in new partners that really that are leading edge in what they're doing. And not always just work with your old partners. On the other hand, it's also probably not a good idea to only come together in a team of completely new partners with whom you have never worked before, because that may also turn out to be a disaster in the end if you're successful. So a good balance is what I typically recommend, a good mix of people who have experience, and then maybe think of who would really be the best partner in this field to address this question. Work plan is perhaps something that is very difficult to give recommendations, but the evaluators will judge the work plan. Here, very often, it's more about a high-level view and understanding that these people who are suggesting the work know how to organize it. They have a solid approach. They have structured it clearly. And one aspect that maybe one recommendation that I can give to you is to focus on the interfaces. So typically what goes wrong in many of the work plans is that the interfaces between either different partners or between different parts of the work plan are not clearly described. And then for an evaluator, it can become very confusing. How is this part delivered to the other partner, and what's the interface between these two work packages? That is something where the problems typically arise. And in larger projects also, putting everything together. So sometimes there is no real activity. Everybody works on their part, but then there is no activity to put the parts together. Or sometimes you see projects that completely forget that they should evaluate their work, which of course means that you cannot assess how good it actually is, and you may not be able to deliver a statement about whether you reached your objectives or not. Surprisingly often also forgotten in projects. Allocation of resources does not mean money, it means typically person months. Money would be very difficult. As you know, there are very different levels of salaries throughout Europe. So it's only judged in terms of person months, and then of course, travel costs or other costs for equipment, infrastructure, etc. Here, typically evaluators, I think I've seen more criticism of not enough resources than overspending. Overspending always comes with travel. I don't know why, maybe because it's the easiest to judge. I'm not going to say much more about this, but make sure you have enough resources. And that also may include nowadays that especially in some fields of engineering, it has become very difficult to have enough people, arguing that you have the people, and these are good people. So this could also be important. Threshold, again, 3 out of 5, and the weight is 20%. And then, as I said before, the individual criteria, this will go to a committee, and the committee will then decide. I don't go into the details here, but it will come up with a ranking list and then send feedback to the applicants, where you then can reply or you get the result that you're funded. I think I'll make a short break. Take some questions and let me get some water. I just need a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That was less than a minute.
Thank you for coming back. And we have some some interesting questions. Do you see the questions, Eric?
I could if I would click on the button.
Yeah, because there was one question from Pelin. It was said that the question was answered throughout your presentation, but I think it's interesting question as a summary of your presentation. Could you briefly describe how the process might proceed in the case of an application by a university?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think it's about application process.
Well, I hope the question was answered, but typically, I'm not sure what the process is precisely, but I guess it's about how you
development.
Yeah, maybe. So I think it should be clear in terms of the formal side of it. You submit the project once you have it, and it goes through this evaluation. It may come back with questions, and then you reply, and then there is a decision making here. If you're asking about how should a university set up a project, this is a slightly different question, and I believe here it's important. So many of the projects are university driven, so this is certainly possible. It's not a problem. However, there is, of course, a strong need to also talk to people who have a good understanding of the technology in the market. And this is sometimes not so good in the proposals. Now, in Pathfinder Open, theoretically, you could also have just academics coming together. But I don't think it's a very good idea. I think it is a much better idea to show and demonstrate some understanding and to come with some industrial, credible involvement in the proposal, which signifies that there is a true interest. And of course, universities are very different in how good their connections are with such industrial partners. Some have excellent relations, and for them it's easy. Some have a set of spin-offs or startups who they can contact. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a spin-off or a startup in a Pathfinder project. It's very welcome, typically. Of course, there is a credibility issue when you're claiming that this startup will take the European market. That is unlikely, to say the least. So that's probably not what you want to claim. But as a development partner, as a partner that has special competences in the project, absolutely. I hope that answers the question.
I think it was the point. Thank you. Then we had about a question which was
the answers. Pathfinder Open, I believe I said that. It's 1 to 4, the TRL levels.
Yeah. 1 to 4. Would you like to elaborate more? No, it is clear, I think.
I come back, so about the specific subjects, this is what I'm going to talk about now. This is the Pathfinder Challenges. And yes, of course, you can apply for a Pathfinder Open and for Pathfinder Challenges within the same year. Absolutely, not a problem. The only limitation arises when you are rejected. There are certain parts of the program where you have a deadline before you cannot resubmit a proposal, but I'll come back to that within a year, basically. I don't know if Merve wants to add anything or correct me or no?
I think it was clear throughout your presentation, so thank you for your additions.
Thank you. And I need some feedback because there is no audience, you know, this is the thing with, with virtual. All right.
Everything is clear. Thank you.
Good. Then let us continue to the Pathfinder Challenges. Now, it's a bit tricky to present because this goes into technical detail. Okay, but Pathfinder Challenges is what used to be in the old days. There was the FET Open program, which is the Pathfinder Open now, and there was the, oh God, I forgot the name. was Fed Open and Fed Proactive. So this is, if you want, an analogous program to what used to be Fed Proactive. It's the Pathfinder Challenges. The Pathfinder Challenges is pretty much the same when you read just the text. It's again new cutting-edge directions in science and technology to disrupt the field and a market, or create new opportunities by realizing innovative technological solutions grounded again in high risk, high gain research and development. So again, this is very much research-based, technology-minded development. The difference is that indicatively, there's a subtle difference. The technology level is 2 to 4, so it's not 1 to 4. And this is because the fields have already been identified. So this is only in selected areas. I come back to that. In terms of what you can get in funding, I have to, so here is a warning. I think I have read in the latest draft 4 million per project. Please double check. And then, of course, you have to check with the final version. So it's either 3 or 4 million. Again, this is a research and innovation action with typically 100% funding of eligible costs with a significant budget. And you have to check again the cutoff dates. Hopefully, within the next few weeks, the final program will be published. The challenges, as I said, part of the Pathfinder program defines the topics, and this means it defines not just the research areas, it also defines relatively specific outcomes. So it very clearly says what is expected from this project, what should it deliver. The agency also publishes a document, the challenge guide, that describes some background. This is typically very useful because you will find a more detailed explanation of what this field is about. I should say that you may or may not agree with what's written in the challenge guide. As a researcher, you may have a different opinion on some of the aspects. For example, you may easily think this is too heavy on one part of the field and too light on another. This is just because, of course, this is not written by, it's not a scientific document. This is an administrative document that comes from the consultations that the Commission has and they have to rely on experts. Some of them will, again, also then submit a proposal, I should say. But so typically, this may not reflect all the views that you have of a field. That's not a big problem. I wouldn't shy away from submitting a project just because the challenge guide maybe goes in a slightly different direction or does not list one technology that you think should be done. But of course, the challenge guide will give you an idea of what the field is about. And they will also usually give background literature and things like that. They will in particular also describe the state of the art, which is nice. And you may not agree with the description of the state of the art, but it's quite informative to read that. And it would be, on the contrary, a big mistake not to know this state of the art when you are preparing the proposal. So make sure you read those documents and make sure that you know that, because otherwise that's kind of really showing you're not up to speed with the field. It gives a little bit of technical information. It will usually also describe the motivation, why the agency thinks that this is a proper area, which means this is about the societal, economic, and environmental impacts that this technology could have. Here it very nicely says, if the objectives are achieved, this is the way to think. And references, as I said. The projects may still have top scientific results, and actually I would say They are expected to deliver very good scientific results, but of course also intellectual property should be a result and is more than welcome. That should then also be properly protected. So again, similar to Pathfinder Open, it's about having an ambitious idea, only that here the field is already defined. So your idea in most cases may be slightly more advanced in terms of technology readiness level. It may be more about developing something further or to realizing something. There is this terminology, new deep tech, which is often used. So it is technology that becomes possible through cutting edge science that hasn't been around before. This can be many things. This can be, you know, substances, this can be technologies, this can be architectures. In cryptology, it could even be, you know, mathematics. It goes as far as that. But it needs to lay the foundation for such an era. It's basically deep tech means high tech, only that high tech has a very strange definition that is already used. So this is why the term deep tech is used. So it's probably not so important. And again, it's about long-term solutions in the long run that will disrupt the practice or a market. And again, there is both aspects in a good proposal, the science aspect, maybe three aspects: the science aspect, the technology aspect, and the market aspect, with a strong emphasis maybe on science and technology. Whereas then later, when we talk about the transition part of the program, it's certainly more on the market, or let's say a more 50-50 approach. Now, since the commission here, the agency, I should say, here defines topics, they also have an idea of bringing the funded projects together in a portfolio. So in this part of the program, it is more likely that there will, actually it's the goal that you have more projects of one type or of one field, and the projects will come together, and the program managers will try to make the projects work together in a more productive, synergistic way. And so this is this portfolio idea, to go beyond just single projects. And that, of course, is more likely to be possible when you have a topic. In Pathfinder Open, it's very difficult because there can be any ideas in any topic. Interestingly, in the Pathfinder Challenges, you can also come as single legal entities, unless in the call document it says differently, but in principle it is allowed. Again, you need to check. If you have two partners, then they need to be from two different countries. That's maybe the most important thing to know. So check whether single participation is possible. If you have two, they need to be from two different countries. The single entity cannot be a medium or large company. That's also important to know. Some of the challenges have slightly different criteria. So the challenge 1, which I'm going to explain in a minute, is only open to collaborative projects. But I think here, if you have questions, it will be a good idea to talk to your national contact point. And I should also say that if you come as a single legal entity, despite the fact that it's possible, it may be easier to write a good proposal in a partnership of either 2 or 3. Because, for example, there is always something that someone else can do better, and then that is a good idea to bring them in. Now, there are 6 topics that are mentioned in the in the program for this year, in the Pathfinder Challenges part of the program. They are described in rather, well, not very much detail, but the description is much longer than what I can give here, and I don't want to bore everybody with the description of going through these one by one. That would be a rather boring exercise. So I will just mention the topics and say a few things about it. First topic is carbon dioxide and nitrogen management and valorization. So I believe this is easy to understand. Basically, this is about addressing climate change, and in particular through CO2, valorization, as it's called. So the idea here is to help a zero carbon process that may lead to renewable fuels or net zero CO2 materials by using renewable energy, for example, as input. If you're interested in this topic, I would encourage you to really have a look at the work program. It's important to note that what the agency expects is relatively clearly described. So they really say, as an outcome and impact, they want a net zero carbon process involving the conversion of CO2 from various sources and streams into renewable fuels or net zero materials using renewable energy as an input. So this is relatively narrow. The other option is nitrogen integrated management cycle, a nitrogen circular economy to avoid or significantly reduce the nitrogen release from combustion or from fertilizers, etc., in conjunction with the conversion of nitrogen compounds to inert nitrogen or their recovery, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to read all the details, also because I'm not a chemist. You really have to read this and make sure. It's still a relatively wide range when you consider that the proposals can be, let's say, slightly more agriculture or more combustion engineering. So this is still, in terms of application, it is very wide, but you need to address what's written here very specifically. Now, the second point is this mid to long-term systems integrated storage, again, in the energy area, with the idea very much of coupling to increase basically energy systems flexibility, and storage technologies, of course, help to roll out and better use renewable energy or enable energy efficiency technologies such as waste heat recovery, etc. So I think this is the general topic. Again, here there are some very specific details in the text, such as the avoidance of critical raw materials. So it's whatever you're doing here should also be in itself sustainable. And again, there is a very specific description of the objectives, which I have listed here, and the expected outcomes, which are different. You need to address both. So the objectives are, for example, computational modeling and optimization applied to materials, components, and control. So this is interesting. You can actually, it is plausible to submit something that is really focusing on computational modeling. I am not 100% convinced that by just submitting a pure, let's say, simulation tool development, you would be successful in this call, because it would be probably difficult to argue that you can have a huge impact unless this is such a great technology that is in demand that you can argue for it. But as I'm just saying, although it's allowed, it may not be enough. You may also have to think a little bit more into some of the other bullet points here, which are heating, cooling storage, energy storage, of course, thermal energy storage technologies for industrial and building applications, and also new concepts for H2 storage or compression. So it's still a wide variety. In the end, what should come out of it is solutions that will optimize European energy storage and thus enable demand response strategies for higher penetration of intermittent renewable technologies such as wind energy, for example. The third topic is cardiogenomics, a very specific topic. So this is about combining genetic testing, transcriptomics, proteomics, or metabolomics analysis with critical phenotypes that can improve the management of cardiovascular diseases or, for example, identify who's at risk. Again, there is a rather specific description. It's really, the objectives are about identifying gene variants of high biological significance, to identify novel targets based on these gene variants for specific cardiovascular disease indications, and to seek for novel technology solutions where you have a contribution to the development and acceleration of first-in-class therapies for these indications. And what you have to show here is that you have access also to a large cohort of genomic and or transcriptomics or proteomics or metabolomics databases from cardiovascular disease patients. So this is something to keep in mind. Fourth topic is the technologies to support a radical shift from episodic to continuous healthcare. That's probably a slightly broader topic where it's about novel devices for unobtrusive patient monitoring before they have a problem and seek help from a doctor. I think here, obviously, I believe the target is relatively clear. Obviously, this is a topic where you need to take into account challenges such as privacy, challenges related to errors that you can make. There are certain risks that are involved here, but I think this is a relatively broad topic. Here, I've listed the objectives here, and the expected outcome basically is the establishment of the basis of the transformation of no less than the transformation of a part of the health system towards a more or less symptom-triggered approach to healthcare, where patients are, or actually individuals before they become patients, accompanied continuously. A really cool topic scientifically is the next one, DNA-based digital data storage. I guess that is something really for a handful of specialists. It's new approaches for coding, decoding, modification, or computational use of digital data in synthetic DNA. I won't say too much about it. I guess you need to be in this field in order to have a chance here. The expected outcome is basically new ways of storing information and to some extent also processing it with the help of DNA-based data storage. And the sixth topic is alternative approaches to quantum information processing, communication, and sensing. So it's not enough that you're doing quantum. There are obviously also alternative approaches within that field that have not yet been massively addressed, and this topic is about precisely that. So it can include terrestrial or space applications, but it is really about, let's say, slightly less mainstream quantum information processing. I have to admit, I was surprised when reading this that this is what's addressed, but why not? The expected outcome here would be again a technology breakthrough that is not so much related to those that we have seen in recent years, and it should deliver, let's say, a more diverse approach to information processing technologies that exploits quantum effects. Again, please read the detail in the description. Again, a relatively specialized field in order to understand also what's considered more mainstream and what would be considered the alternative approaches. I guess, let me see, I think, oops. no, I should say that there is a very similar approach to evaluation in terms of the criteria. Of course, there is again excellence, impact, and implementation. There is slightly different thresholds. There is a threshold of 3.5 compared to the challenge open, but otherwise the weights are very similar. Again, here, there is a slightly different evaluation process because the individual scores of the evaluators are just mathematically taken together. The proposal score is the result of the weighted sum of the median scores of the individual evaluations on the criteria. And then there is also a slightly different approach at the second step because here the evaluation takes into account portfolio considerations, because here they cannot really do this in the Pathfinder Open. So it depends a little bit on what the categories are or what components are, and this needs to be described in the proposal. Maybe something to think about a little bit. So the idea here is that when you go out with this call, and maybe the problem can be sort of split into different areas or components. Not everybody should work on the same component. What the agency wants is that all parts of the problem are addressed, and this is why they take into account some of these portfolio considerations. In the past, there hasn't been massive influence of this. There is a little bit of that influence. So overall, quality will still win, I should say. But the idea is to bring together a coherent set of projects that then can work together and have some synergy. So this is why there is this element, and the EIC program managers will try to actively manage this. Yeah, I think I should say this compared to previous, and especially compared to FET, program managers have a slightly more active role. They will make sure that the vision which they have is still being followed. They also can bring in innovation activities. There is also this additional option of additional funding for some activities, and they really try to be active in supporting these projects so that they are ready for a next phase, maybe for some follow-up funding. Yeah, I think here are some of the examples. For example, they could also work on, let me take one of those things, regulatory aspects. For some of these new technologies, it may be necessary to also talk to regulators to improve the regulation environment in order to make this technology potentially successful. Something we are not often very good at in Europe. And this is the idea here, to relatively early identify what could be potential challenges or what could be opportunities also for regulators to create the same conditions for everybody, to create this level playing field, as it's typically called. And of course, also the engagement and interaction among the projects can in some cases be useful to facilitate some cross-sectoral contamination and get some input from other projects. And that's what they try to do rather actively. All right. Questions and answers.
Yeah, we have, I think we have a good question regarding IP. Could you explain adequate formal protection of the generated IP a bit more detailed manner, please?
That is a very good point.
Yeah, it's an excellent
and a very difficult one. I think so of course, typically what you do as a company is you patent, and as a university as well, at least you should. And that is, of course, the straightforward way. It has become much easier now. There are now options, even in Europe, for software patents, and there are also options for, there's a new European, I forgot what the proper name is, sorry, patent that makes it easier to hand in patents. So that's the number one options. But of course, there are many other options that range from protecting parts of the knowledge. The most important aspect typically in the proposal is to describe that you have an idea of what this knowledge is likely to be when you develop it. So in terms of what is it concretely? Is this, so it could be a process. It could be a process in chemistry where you say, okay, this is perhaps to be protected. And then you say, and this will be done, for example, by partner X or by ensuring this and that. So it's not that you need to already say we are going to develop a patent on, that's probably not possible because you don't want it. But you should be clear about the kind of knowledge area where you are expecting worthy things to protect. And then maybe you can already say, okay, there are some things which we will protect through a patent. Some other things may be protected through secrecy, typically not a very good idea, or through licensing or whatever means of protection there are. There are various classical means, and it just, you should demonstrate that you have an understanding of how this could work. Why is this so important? It's not so much important within the project. It is important so that later on, either yourself, your team members or consortium partners, or someone else can come and can use this knowledge and lead it to the market. That's what the agency really wants to see. And this is easier and more credible if you can already identify what these bits and pieces would be or are likely to be. Of course, it's research, it's science. You don't 100% know, but you may have an idea what it could be. Hope this answers the question. Is the applicant expected to describe the expected outcome in terms of IP? That's, I think, what I just answered. Yeah, so I think that's what I answered. So no, you do not have to have an already filed patent. That is typically not expected. If you have one in a similar area, it's always good to mention it.
It's just to describe how it's going to be protected, not protected.
Okay. Any other questions? I think not.
Not at this point.
There's one. As for the visionary concept formulation, would you suggest a series of development exercises, or should this come from the coordinator? I'm asking this because this seems to be groundbreaking, just like the several partners. I'm not entirely sure I understand the question. I'm not sure I understand the question. Please, I mean, you can also ask the question, but I'll try to give an answer. Typically, what is a problem? So the visionary, are you talking about before you submit the proposal? Yes. So I think this is what you're asking about. This is about when you sit down and you create the proposal. So at the proposal stage. Yes, I think this is a good idea. I think it is a good idea to sit down with your partners and have a little bit of a visionary workshop and really try to push the limits, push the boundaries a bit. I'm very often involved in such workshops, and there are several techniques that you can use for doing this. It's one important or one very easily doable technique is scenario techniques, where you think about, you define some of the variables that currently limit you, and then you try to push the boundaries of those variables a bit and see where could you go and how could you do it, and then you assess which of those would be interesting without being too incremental, because if you're only incremental, that's not what we want to see. We want to, it should be let's say an order of magnitude at least, or you have a completely new idea. But I think absolutely it is always a good idea to share the vision with your partners. Whether you need a lot of development exercises, so to speak. I'm not so sure. I think this may be something that you can do in half a day and maybe then have a look at it again after some time. If your question was about during the project, then things are different, because I believe in the project, of course, there should also still be this visionary element, but you will not have typically the time to go through a lot of iterations. Although it is a good idea to have at least one iteration in a project where you're trying to improve something or have a prototype and then maybe want to build another prototype, it is very rare to be able to do more than 2 of such iterations, because you just don't have the time. So I'm not sure this was to your question, but it's just another point from my experience. All right.
Thank you very much, Eric, for your answer. What do you think about having
yes.
5 minutes technical break? Because
absolutely.
We are already 2 hours in the webinar.
Yeah, and the next part is shorter anyway.
Yeah.
So it's now 2 o'clock. Let's say in, I don't know, 2:05, 6:00, whatever you want. 10.
Oh, it's 4 in Turkey. It's 2.
Sorry.
Your time. So I would propose 5 minutes break. Maybe.
All right. Very
Just
good.
to grab a coffee or.
Yes. Very good.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Passt leider gerade gar nicht, ich bin mitten in einem Meeting, tut mir leid. Ja, besseres morgen Nachmittag. Danke. Prem. Dankeschön. Wieder.
Okay, I think that it's time to start. I think we have, yeah, okay. One was reply to your answer, and one question. Okay. There was no questions.
Thanks for the positive feedback, at least. Do you still see my presentation?
No? Yeah, perfect. You can see it now.
And you see the right thing. You
Yes,
see
yes.
the single slide. Okay.
Last
Good.
slide.
All right. Then let's go to the other part of the program that I will talk about. There has been a question before on the accelerator. I'm not going to talk about the accelerator today. If this is the only thing you're interested in, you can leave now. Actually, but EIC Transition is the other part of the program, and I would like to frankly admit that I'm not so knowledgeable in this part. I have been mostly involved in the past with Pathfinder type activities. So this will also be a bit shorter. But the idea behind the EIC Transition is rather straightforward. It's about funding innovation activities that go beyond the experimental proof of principle in laboratory. So it is a slightly more advanced level. It is about the maturation and validation of a novel technology in the lab, but also in relevant application environments. So it is also about the development of a business case. And now I think here it's fair to say we need to be a bit careful. Even if EIC Transition is closer to the market, this is not a marketing program. Yeah? So this is not about just developing a business case and trying to internationalize your product. That's wrong. It still has this technology connection very much, and it typically also has a research component, let's say, but it is more balanced in the sense that in a transition project, you will definitely have to address the business aspects much more. Typically, this will be with smaller grants, for example, up to 2.5 million, but again, check with the final text of the program, to validate and to demonstrate technologies in areas where they then later would also be applied in a market. So really, this is about developing a technology to market readiness. And it's analogous to the Pathfinder program in that it also has an open part and a challenge part. However, the challenge part does not relate to the same challenges as the Pathfinder Open. So don't make this mistake. It's that would also logically not be possible, right? Because the idea is that the Pathfinder Challenges developer technologies, so you cannot have a call on how to do the transition to the market in the same year at least. So don't mix up these two things. There are other challenges. These challenges, however, may come from previous such calls. So the difference between the two fields, again, is Transition Open doesn't have predefined thematic priorities. It is theoretically open to any field of science and technology. I'm emphasizing theoretically because it's not open to any technology. It's only open to those which have been previously funded. And I come back to in which programs. And secondly, the EIC Transition Challenge, again, like previously, has identified topics which are in thematic areas you could call them strategic technologies, because obviously someone has made a strategic decision to bring those technologies closer to the market. So EIC Transition, as I said, builds on previous projects, and this is really important. It builds on results generated, for example, by previous EIC Pathfinder projects that I just explained, or it can build on FET projects, ones I also mentioned. So this is projects from a program from Horizon 2020, FET Open, FET Proactive, or FET Flagships. It can also be from some specific ERANETs and ERC proof of concept research. So it's quite a range of different programs, but it's only those. You cannot just come with any technology. You really need to build on those results. Now, the tricky part is what qualifies as building on results generated by? And that is also, again, difficult to answer. Why? Well, because projects may not always have the results that they originally promise. I myself have worked in a very interesting project that delivered completely different, but rather different results from what we originally thought it would be delivered. But this is the nature of research. You can be surprised, and that's still fine. It just needs to be, it needs to come from one of those projects. It doesn't have to be what was originally promised. And very importantly, you do not have to come with the same team. And indeed, as I will later emphasize again, is you even could be, let's say, a stranger to those projects. But let's stick for these previous projects for a bit. So this, let's call it the mother project, where the results come from. This should not have finished more than 24 months ago. And you do not need to be a participant in the project. You don't have to be the principal investigator. You don't have to be the owner of the previous project. And you don't have to be the owner of the intellectual property. However, you need to, of course, have access to that IP through a license agreement or through a whatever type of work agreement it is that makes it possible for you to work on that project and to make it credible that you are now developing this technology further. Now, again, this is a fully funded project, so this would be 100% of the costs. It's smaller grants between 500,000 and 2.5 million, typically duration, again, up to 3 years. In the last call, so there was already a call in this new activity, I should say. The minimum requirement is a small consortium of 2 to 5 independent legal entities, but also, again, a single legal entities, but large companies are not eligible. I think that is something to keep in mind. As I said, it's a relatively new scheme. It has only been tested last year with the aim of bridging this gap from the proof of concept to a viable business case. So obviously it addresses higher TRL levels, namely the levels 4 to 6, where we go to business and market readiness. I have a sketch on the next slide. And to increase this maturity towards technology levels 5 to 6, to develop business plans as well as making the solution investment ready. So you can imagine this a little bit as, you have a technology idea, it has been kind of understood. You now want to make it mature in a further project. This will require research. And at the end of it, whatever you have should be so convincing that a potential investor is able to give additional money. So that's the idea behind this pipeline. And really, you could imagine it as, for example, having a project that basically, represents this yellow arrow here, that it brings something from a Pathfinder project where, for example, you had an experimental proof of concept, and now you're bringing it up to at least level 4, if not 5 or 6, where you have the technology demonstrated in a relevant environment, but you do not have an operational system in the target environment. And you certainly do not have an actual system proven that's operating already. That is asking too much. That's something that you would probably do with the last step of the investment, bringing it really to the market and trying to sell it and having first applications rolled out with first customers. So that's the idea. So in the end, what you get out of an EIC transition project is something that is a demonstrated technology that you also understand sufficiently to say that this is effective for the application. You have an understanding of how you would make money with it, which is probably the most relevant part. And this may include a business plan. I don't think it's an absolute necessity, but it's a reasonable target so that you can, in the future, lure investors to your undertaking. It should also allow a future uptake of the technology. If you're not doing it yourself, at least you should be able to license the technology. So it is not an absolute must that the organization developing this then also does the marketing. If it's licensed, that's perfectly okay. But you should have a project that is ready, as I said, for investment. Now, this could be any other investor found on the market, but it could also theoretically be a follow-up project from EIC. This is the EIC Accelerator, which is a specific program funding SMEs, startups, or spin-offs that are seeking to realize such a technology-based company. I'm not mentioning more about the EIC Accelerator here. This is a different, would be a different talk. So what could this be in practice? It's a bit broader than in the, let's say, in the Pathfinder part, because the nature of the technology is probably, and what it needs may be rather different. So it could be, of course, it can still be a more research type project where you have a collaborative consortium that develops some aspect of the technology towards a specific application, for example. So maybe your original technology is relatively neutral with respect to various application areas, and maybe you want to develop this application now into one area, or maybe you want to develop it in two areas and see where does it better fit, and where can we come closer to the market, or where is the impact better, higher. Another one would be to have a market opportunity, to realize that there is a market opportunity, and to see that there is previous results of an EIC project or an EIC proof of concept project that you did not yourself participate in. Now, this is a very important point. In this scheme, which is relatively new, you can just look at previous results of EIC Pathfinder projects. You can say, oh, this looks interesting. Let me see if I can develop this technology further and bring it to the market. So here, this could use licensing agreements. I should say in some projects, maybe the previous project was not properly protected, then you may not even need this, but that's a special case. But it's really important to emphasize, if you are a technology-minded entrepreneur, you can really just search the database of previous projects, see what's there, and then realize it in an EIC-funded transition project. Or you could go as far as thinking about product creation. You have a group of entrepreneurial-minded researchers in an RTI, in a research and technology or development organization, that want to turn a project result into a product. And then what you can do and ask the EIC to help you fund is develop a business model, create a startup, and be relatively close to the market. Now, usually this will also include some technical work. I think it always does, but it is relatively close to the market with some higher TRLs, and then maybe with some lower level of funding. I think this example was is included in the program document, and I would be a little bit careful here. I think so. This is possible. It can be done. We will see how much of it still the evaluators would still expect this to be technological research work. That I find is a bit difficult to predict. I don't think you could just come with something, just give me money for writing a business plan. I think that is not really what would work. But as I said, at the end of it would be a project that is ready for the next stage. The evaluation, as you would expect, is a bit more focused on the impact than on the excellence and the implementation. So here, also when you read the details of the evaluation criteria, they are slightly different. So it's not so much about just excellence, it's about the technological breakthrough. It still needs to be a novel technology, which it probably is if it comes out from a Pathfinder project. But it is again about the potential for new applications and functionalities. This is more in the foreground here. So what is this potential? Is there a potential for application? Can you demonstrate it? And then, of course, have you identified these application areas, which I think is really key? Perhaps a part of the project could also be devoted to finding such application areas, but you need to have a pretty good understanding where these application areas could be. And then, do you have the appropriate objectives for realizing this? So it's again slightly different from the other two evaluation criteria in the Pathfinder Open or the other part of the Pathfinder program. Impact is probably the most relevant one. So because the first sub-criterion here again is business and market fit, which you didn't have in the others. In the Pathfinder part, there is no business or market fit aspect. This is new. It's about the business model and the product features. It's about, very importantly, the involvement of users. They don't need to be a part of the project necessarily, but you need to involve them in a credible way. This could be a user group. This could be trial customers, tests, demonstrations, such things. It's again about economic and societal benefits as before, but here more with an emphasis of how effective is this technology? What can you really achieve, which may be different from what you have maybe first thought when you first created the Pathfinder project, and also about entrepreneurship and partnerships. So is there a suitable entrepreneurial lead behind it? Is it credible that what you're promising here can be done also with market impact? And as I said before, that doesn't necessarily mean you need great industry, but you need to demonstrate how this could be rolled out, how partnerships could develop into something that is able to grow. And in the implementation, it's really about the team, about, of course, the expertise to do whatever you are suggesting to be done, but also here again with some commercial aspects underlying it. Of course, work plan, I think, is very similar, and allocation of resources is the same as before. So you see, this is a slightly different set of criteria. Before you submit, really make sure you're addressing all of these criteria. The criteria as they are listed here are not necessarily the same that you'll find in the document. You need to make sure that all of this is really addressed in your proposal when you're submitting it. They are also evaluated a bit differently. In the first step is very similar. 3 or more experts come together to score against the criteria that I've just listed, and then you get the average scores sum as the overall score of the proposal, and then the agency creates a ranking list for twice the projects, the budget that is available. So if you sum up all the money that the projects are asking for, we are now creating a list to a cutoff point that is twice as expensive as what the proposal budget is, or the program budget is for this call. So that means from that list, you know, you can only fund every other project. And then there is a further ranking step that I won't explain in detail. There is a correction for applications that are submitted by women-led SMEs or by consortia with a lot of women in leading roles. The target is to have at least a third of those in the funded projects. There is a lot of detail in this, how this is being done. I'm not going there, but it's just for you to know that it is advantageous to have women in leading roles in such a project, because this is actually maybe relatively difficult in some areas, in some engineering areas. And then you are invited or not. And I mentioned before what happens if you are rejected here. So if you are only below threshold and you're not in this ranking list in one of the criteria, then you can resubmit within 12 months. If you fail in 2 or more thresholds, then you cannot resubmit the same proposal, improved proposal, within the following 12 months. In the second step, so then when you're invited, what happens then? You're actually invited to a face-to-face interview with a jury. You can come as a team, but only with up to 5 people. And it can only be those individuals which are mentioned in the proposal and in the future project, not just with anybody. And then you have a jury to which you pitch your proposal, who will ask you questions aimed at clarifying aspects. So this is analogous to some previous exercises. There is experience with this procedure. And then what you get is a go or no go from the jury. You will not receive a new scoring, but you will receive feedback. Now it can happen, of course, that here you get a no-go. That you get that you meet all evaluation criteria in the first step, but you are not selected for funding. Then you potentially get a seal of excellence, which basically says, look, this is a project that's very good, but we didn't have enough money, or it didn't end up high on the list. This seal of excellence can then be used by other agencies, either to fund you. So this could be, for example, up to a national agency to take this seal of excellence as something that they use and say, all right, even if the commission didn't have enough money, maybe we can fund it. There is some other mechanism that other people may develop. But so this is a relatively new. It has been around as an idea for quite some time, but I think here it's now implemented. Only relevant, again, as I said, if you are successful, but you're just not in the funding range. Yeah, and then let me come back to this aspect of the IPR agreement. As the proposals need to build on previous projects that are from rather specific calls, because they can only come from those FET calls and the Pathfinder calls, you must include a declaration by the IP owner, if there are any, that you have the necessary rights and ownership. So this is part of the proposal already, and this is quite important. If you are not the owner, then this is even more important, but you do not necessarily have to be a member of those previous projects. This is, I think, a very, very important thing to keep in mind. Now, similarly to the Pathfinder part of the program, the transition part, again, has, as I said, the open and the challenge part. In open, you can just come with anything that was funded previously in one of those projects. You need to come with a balanced approach, as I said, and you have a suitable mix of research, validation, and demonstrators. In the challenge area, you can only come in predefined areas listed in the program, which in turn are typically built on previous calls. And now in the draft work program, you will see there is a general topic, green digital devices for the future. There is a topic, process and system integration of clean energy technologies, and RNA-based therapies and diagnostics for complex or rare genetic diseases. Like before, there is a list of relatively specific objectives and the expected outcomes. So for the green digital devices for the future, you need to demonstrate novel digital devices architectures with a clear, quantifiable advantage. That's really important. The outcome is new devices, architectures that are energy efficient, or maybe at the same level of energy, but improving speed and performance, or miniaturization, or both. It can also be disruptive hardware components, and it can be novel designs of large-scale complete systems where next-generation information processing or storage is a part. Important is this needs to be green, this needs to be energy efficient. The second topic would be the process and system integration of clean energy technologies, analogous to before, but a bit different. So here the objectives are the development of renewable fuels, and the expected outcome is storage technology that demonstrates use cases or clear qualitative measurement, a credible business model, and an exploitation strategy. This is quite important here. You need to have all three of those elements in order to be successful. And finally, the RNA-based therapies and diagnostics for complex or rare genetic diseases. If you're in that field, I think you know what you would have to do. This is, again, developing these technologies further, make them more effective, and bring them to the market. And this is all I wanted to say about the transition part of the program. There is not so much more to say about it. You will see it's very well described in the program document, but make sure to read its final version. All right, I think I've spoken for a very long time, Alex.
Thank you, Eric. We have one more question, and could you elaborate again about the consortium, mother consortium, and you mentioned that, but
yeah. I think this is quite interesting, and I'm really surprised the agency goes ahead with this. So the clear answer is, well, you're asking, Hakan, I think is asking, should the mother consortium to be retained with all the partners? This is different from can it. So theoretically, as I said, in the transition part of the program, no partner needs to be the same. You can come as an entrepreneur, you read through the results of previous projects, you find something interesting, you call the guy who invented whatever was invented in that project and say, well, are you not taking this further? Can I have a license agreement with you to develop this further? But of course, it is very often useful and credible, and maybe also a good idea to include one of those partners should they have an interest, and maybe you also need their competence. However, the extreme that you are asking here, that it is the same consortium, I have seen it in the past. I've seen it happen with other funding schemes, and it worked. But usually, you don't need all the partners. So whatever the agreements may not be so simple if there is a really good technology, because then maybe also those partners who were only, let's say, a marginal partner in the previous project may ask for some shares. So this may be a little bit tricky, but typically license agreements are manageable. If you know what you want, you can get them. So clear answer, no, probably the consortium needs to be different because it needs to be much more market oriented. You need different competences than in the original proposal.
But it's good to have some continuity.
Yes, but I mean, of course, it shouldn't keep you from going on. I mean, that is very clear. But I guess, as I said, the requirements are a bit different.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
So, I think we covered all aspects on the agenda, yes, all sessions.
I think we did. And we are nearly on time.
And we,
I believe. Are we?
do we have any final comments? I don't see any more questions.
No, I believe my final comment, maybe also as an external person here, would be to advise to talk to your NCPs, to your contact points, and to your agencies. They know a lot about it. They may not always be, sorry to say that, may not always be the most involved with the business side of things, but they know a lot about the administrative things. Some of the questions may not be so easy to answer for them because it's still a relatively new program. It very much, a lot of it has not been established, although it is theoretically fully developed now, but it's, this is still a little bit in creation. So you need to be a bit patient, but it's also an opportunity. I think it's a very good opportunity that shouldn't be missed. We will see how much the program managers and so on will really be able to actively manage this. But if they do a good job, I think it's a good program. It's one that is very promising. For the researchers, I think they have been rather critical because they were thinking that the FET aspects have now that they have lost this. But I think this we will see this. I'm not so sure. The EIC has been promising to also really want to make this about breakthrough technologies, about some really good research, close to basic research. So I think let's give them the benefit of doubt and see what comes from it.
Okay, thank you. Merve, any comments from your side?
Yes, a few comments I have. Before that, I want to thank Dr. Erich Prem for his fruitful presentation. And thank you, Alexander, for the organization. I just want to remind you that all of the event is based on the draft version. So please wait for the final version for the dates, and probably the topics won't change. But for the dates, please be patient. I think it will be released soon. And finally, I want to also mention about our, actually Alexander talked about Pathfinder coordinator funded this year from Turkey. And also we have another from Transition. So I just wanted to encourage everyone to apply for these programs. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you. So maybe we should also mention that we have planned to organize one more Pathfinder for this year, Pathfinder webinar, probably for the future cut-off dates. So if you will not submit your proposal for the first cut-off dates, you will have opportunity again to participate in our webinar and improve your proposals. Okay, so I think we came to an end, and again I would like to thank Erich for his very clear presentations.
Thanks.
Also Merve and TÜBİTAK team, and our technical support team, which is sitting somewhere behind the screen. And looking forward to see you again. And thank you all our participants who stayed with us till the end. And see you again during our next trainings. Thank you very much, and bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.